Hello, this is Cynthia Douthit with the Jewish Christian Studies Center. And today we're going to have a brief look at the Book of Enoch. Now, some of the churches today in their small groups seem to be studying the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch is actually made up of 5 individual books. And one thing I will tell you is, and it might come to several of you as a surprise, the Book of Enoch was not written by Enoch that we see in Genesis. Enoch that didn't die, that was translated into heaven, who was and then was no more. So the very first thing about the Book of Enoch is it was not written by Enoch. And so this is kind of an important thing as we are going through and seeing what is recorded within the Book of Enoch. You know, we can gain some insight into the time and the culture, maybe when these different books of Enoch were written. It gives us maybe some insight into the thoughts of some people, what was on their mind, what they were curious about, and what they were wanting answers to. But really, the Book of Enoch would be a book that someone might go to the library, so to speak, and check out. It was not and is not a part of the Christian Bible, and it did not find its way into the Jewish scriptures. So right there, that might give us a hint as to what the people in the past thought about the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is presented as if Enoch was writing it or would writing it. I don't necessarily want to say I want to go so far as to these authors were channeling Enoch, but they were writing as if they were Enoch. But in reality, it was written by several authors over a span of years. And depending on what book it is, it can be possibly written as late as the 10th century AD. There are those who say that the first part of Enoch was written in the 2nd century BC, and that some show that it was written after the time of 70 AD, which is when Herod's temple was destroyed. Some record as some of the writings are as late as the 3rd century AD, and there are those scholars who think that part of it was written as late as the 10th century AD. So when you're looking at these things and keeping it in mind, and you realize that Enoch didn't write this, he wasn't doing this great prophecy to tell you about the coming of Jesus, this Son of Man, Son of God, you can see how people get excited about it because they think Enoch back in Genesis was writing these things, but possibly, as some scholars think, some of these writings were as late as the 10th century AD. One thing, there is no complete Hebrew version that has survived, even if there were one. There are some scholars that say part of it was written in Aramaic, and some scholars say that part of it was written in Hebrew. But we have no surviving books of Enoch written in Hebrew. But the most complete Book of Enoch comes from the Ethiopic manuscripts, and that was brought to Europe in the late 18th century and was translated into English in the 19th century. So we can see it was just recently translated into English. It's not an ancient English volume for people to read and study. Most scholars believe that the 5 books of Enoch were individual or they were independent works, and only later were they brought into this one volume. And again, it's spanned quite a few years, hundreds of years, and it was written by different authors. The Book of Enoch is considered an apocryphal book, and the apocrypha, that just means hidden. And so the Book of Enoch is considered an apocryphal book or a hidden book. And it is also considered part of a pseudepigrapha. And that just literally means falsely ascribed. And that's what this is. It is falsely ascribed to Enoch. Enoch of the book of Genesis did not write this. It is a pseudepigrapha. It is falsely ascribed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. And it is not a part of the Apocrypha, but it is seen as Apocrypha or apocalyptic literature writings in that it is considered as hidden. There are 10 fragments of the Book of Enoch that was found at Qumran and at the Dead Sea. And we know some of these fragments do date back to the 2nd BC, 2nd century BC. And while it seems that sections of Enoch gave prophecy concerning Jesus because he made references of the eternal king or the Son of Man, but we also read these references in other parts of the Bible. Daniel, in his writings, in Daniel 7, in verses 13 through 14, he says, I kept watching the night visions, and when I saw coming with the clouds of heaven someone like a son of man, he approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. To him was given rulership, glory, and a kingdom, so that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His rulership is an eternal rulership that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. So this is what Daniel wrote. And Daniel was believed to have written somewhere possibly between 604 and 532 BC. Some people, scholars say it was as early as the 6th century BC, or possibly as late as the 2nd century, 300 BC. But what we see is the book of Daniel was written, in more probability, before these books of Enoch. So it would have been plausible for whoever was writing the book of Enoch to have to have read Daniel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and would have had this understanding. So if he was writing as a falsely ascribed as writing as Enoch, he could rely on some of these books that he had read to help it look like he was prophesying and telling things to come. And Ezekiel was written in 593 to 571 BC. So we can see that if some of the writings of Enoch were 2nd century BC, as opposed to 500, and if some of it was written after 70 AD, or even as late as the 3rd or the 10th century AD, we can see how these people who were writing Enoch may have read the Tanakh, the Old Testament. There's also the possibility that they may have even read some of the writings in the New Testament to make it look like they were writing something with an apocalyptic or a prophecy attitude. So we see how easy it would be for these people who were writing under the name of Enoch to have had access to the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and for some of the writings, even the New Testament. Some scholars suggest that parts were written after Yeshua lived and walked the earth. So some of the books of the New Testament would have been written. So we can see how these authors of Enoch would have been very familiar with what we refer to as the Old Testament and the New Testament. But it could be that the authors were just using some of the jargon of that day, and that they were using some of the literature that they had read in the Old Testament. Some of these discoveries of these writings believed to be from the time of Genesis, and it's just not so. In the future, we're going to look at some of these things in the videos that I'm going to do about the 5 books of Enoch, and give a little insight into each one, and to maybe see why possibly it can tell us what people were looking for at that time. There have been many times throughout history that people have been discouraged and they wanted encouragement. And even the book of John, the book of Revelation, that is a type of apocalyptic literature. It's talking about things are bad, things are going to get worse, but there is good news in sight. Because when we read the book of Revelation, we know that those first letters were sent to certain communities, certain churches, as we would say. And so it had to mean something to them at that time, the tribulation, the trials, the rough times they were going through, to give them encouragement as the day to come. And so that's what we can also see with some of these other apocalyptic literature that we are going to be looking at. But one of the things I wanted to let you know about the book of Enoch, Enoch describes 10 heavens, and he describes where the angels control the atmospheric phenomena, such as snow and rain. I don't think the angels are in charge of snow and rain. According to the scripture, God is in charge of everything. He created nature, so to speak, the heavens, the earth, the rain, the thunder. And I don't think that the angels are sitting up there in one part of the heavens that they are controlling the storehouse of snow and rain. Enoch also said he was in the second heaven, and he found it a dark place, a prison where rebel angels were held and being tortured. And then it says he went to the fifth heaven, where Enoch found soldiers of Satan that looked like humans, and they had not yet been sealed in their state. So Enoch convinced them to repent. So these are some of the things that the book of Enoch deals with. And again, some of the churches are studying this, but we need to study it, if we're going to study it, and read it for what it is, and not for it being a part of the Bible that was possibly left out by human error. The book of Enoch was not written by Enoch. It was written by several different authors over a period of time of hundreds of years. So I hope you enjoyed this brief look at the book of Enoch, and we'll look at some of the other books that people are reading and just discovering and making their way back around. And so we want to keep us on the straight and narrow, so to speak. My thought is just read the Bible. But again, we want us to be aware that these books are out there, and I want you to know what they're about so you can talk about them intelligently, and that you can defend maybe why you don't read it or why you do read it. So have a blessed day. Shalom, shalom.